G'day friends, and welcome to this reflection on St. Joseph Most Chaste. So I'm Chris Da Silva. I'm from the Life, Marriage and Family Office, helping to facilitate this whole consecration process for those in the Archdiocese of Sydney and having a fantastic time doing so. So the young St. Joseph, as you can see next to me here, beautifully portrayed, is the most chaste man or human being ever to be conceived with original sin. And we call him Joseph Most Chaste. That should be encouraging to us who are all conceived with original sin too, because it means that in the same model as him, we can also become most chaste or attain the virtue of chastity to a very high degree. When the Catechism talks about chastity, it calls it a long and exacting work. I've always remembered that phrase in the Catechism because I resonated so much with it. Having been saturated by our culture, which is so over-sexualized, so pornified, I suppose you could say as well, I was wounded. I was wounded pretty badly from our culture, our over-sexualized culture. And so I've noticed, for the past 12 years that I've been trying to live out the virtue of chastity, that it is for sure a long and exacting work. Long and exacting means that chastity requires careful attention to detail, real work on ourselves in terms of self-knowledge. We have to be watchful of how the world, the flesh, or the devil might tempt us to be unchaste, especially when we've struggled with that in the past. I want to share a story, though, from 12 years ago that actually convinced me to always strive to live chastely for the rest of my life. So I was actually in year 12 when this happened, and I was at a youth group. I'd only just got involved in going back to youth groups, and we had a boys' small group on that night. And one of the leaders of the small group, he was only about 3 years older than us. He was about 21, and he had just gotten married. And him and his young wife looked like the perfect model marriage, like they were what we wanted to be as young guys. And he sat us down, small group of guys, probably 8 or 9 of us in the room, and he looked very somber and he said to us, I need to share something with you guys tonight, not because I want to, not because it feels good to share this information about my life with you, but because I feel like you need to know about it, because God wants you to know about it. And he shared with us that even though he'd married his high school sweetheart, about the same time that they started dating, which was, I think, year 8 or 9 for them, he had become addicted to porn. And he'd even gotten involved in child porn, just not doing it, but watching it on a pretty regular basis. He never told his girlfriend about it the whole time. Only their first or second year outside of high school, he proposed to his girlfriend, and she accepted. And so they were engaged. And anyway, this is happening up at the Gold Coast. So, they're planning their wedding and everything. It's all going along well. They're really involved in their church. They were Protestants and her dad was a Protestant pastor. So the whole fairy tale scenario was setting itself up really well. Anyway, one day he's at the beach going for a surf, as you do on the Gold Coast. And he comes out from the surf and he notices a particularly attractive young lady sitting on the beach. And he just thinks, I'll just go and say hello. What harm can that do? Goes up to her, says hello, and they get chatting, and it turns out they really hit it off. So they decided, why don't we, take this off the beach and go to the pub across the road for a drink. So they go to the pub across the road, have a drink, and one drink leads to another, and one thing leads to another. And he actually ends up losing his virginity to this stranger who he just met. Now, he did actually end up sharing this information with his fiancée, and they broke up. And after months and months of him begging, she took him back. She forgave him. Her dad, the pastor, forgave him too. But he said to us that day when he was sharing that story, that even to that day, his wife couldn't trust him alone in the room with a screen, with a computer, smartphone, what have you. Because she didn't know if he just might go on porn, he still couldn't control himself. He was lacking chastity to that degree. And he said to us that day, while you guys are still young and single, think about the kind of man that you want to be one day. What kind of husband or what kind of father do you want to be one day? And for me, as somebody who had struggled with porn, I was really hit between the eyes by that statement. And it really encouraged me to pull up my socks and do something about it. And from that moment on, I really began striving for chastity. And I think all of us who want to change our lives need a moment like that, where we really think about, hang on, what are the consequences of the actions that our society just constantly encourages us to take part in? And they're not good consequences. If you want to become chaste in the model of Saint Joseph, we need to pray, we need to fast, we need to recognize the triggers that lead us to become unchaste, and we need to seek healing. We might need an accountability partner. I think that's good for most of us to have. We may even need counseling, and I think it's good to be honest about whether that's the fact, whether we do need that. But looking particularly at Saint Joseph, what stands out about the way that he lived out chastity was his loving surrender to God the Father. He doesn't give the impression of a man who was just self-flagellating, white-knuckling his way to chastity. He is a man who lovingly consecrated his sexuality to God the Father and all of his desires, not just his sexuality, into the hands of this loving Father in heaven. He was able to release them, to let them go. It's not so much about grasping at chastity as like the slippery fish that we feel like we can get a hold of only occasionally because of how many temptations are out there. No, if we get stressed out about this stuff, that's actually an occasion to sin. In many cases, you look at what makes people fall into unchastity when they're trying to be chaste, and it's stress, anxiety, tiredness, hunger, things that turn on the stress response in our bodies. But a peaceful, calm, loving surrender to God, as embodied by Saint Joseph, that's the real path to follow, I think, and which has helped me to achieve chastity on a more of a long-term basis. So thanks very much, guys. I hope that was helpful. I hope you got something out of it. And I am keeping you all in prayer as we continue this journey, consecrating ourselves to Saint Joseph, our spiritual father. Thanks very much. God bless you all.